The roar of the crowd was a familiar symphony, a tidal wave of adoration that washed over Elvis Presley night after night. He stood on stage, bathed in the spotlight, his hips swaying, his voice a potent blend of raw power and tender longing. Thousands of faces, eyes wide with awe, screamed his name. He was the king, the undisputed monarch of rock and roll. And he had everything a man could ever want: fame, fortune, and a love for millions that was almost religious in its fervor. Yet lately, as the final chords of "Can't Help Falling in Love" faded and he took his final bow, a strange emptiness would settle over him. It wasn't sadness, not exactly. It was more like a quiet hum of dissatisfaction, a feeling that something essential was missing. The thrill was still there sometimes, but it was fleeting, quickly replaced by a sense of routine, a gilded cage he'd unknowingly built around himself. He'd started taking karate lessons years ago, a way to stay in shape, to explore a discipline beyond the wild abandon of his stage performances. It began as a hobby, a curiosity, something to fill the endless hours between tours and filming movies. He barely cared for, but gradually it had become more. In the dojo, stripped of his rhinestones and his public persona, he was just Elvis. He was a student focused on the precise movements, the breath control, the quiet inner strength that martial arts demanded. His sensei, a small, unassuming man with eyes that held centuries of wisdom, never treated him like a superstar. He treated him like a student, albeit a talented and dedicated one. Elvis Sensei Tanaka would say, his voice calm, "The true power comes not from the force of your strike, but from the stillness within, from clarity of mind." Elvis found himself clinging to those words. On stage, surrounded by chaos, he yearned for that stillness. He yearned for clarity. The music, which had once been his whole world, now felt like a performance, a duty. He loved his fans, he truly did, but he felt a growing disconnect between the man he was on stage and the man he wanted to be. Constant touring, the relentless demands of his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, for new records and more movies. It was exhausting. And for what? More money, more fame. He had enough of both to last a lifetime. One sweltering Memphis afternoon, after a particularly grueling night of 2 shows, Elvis found himself in his private training room at Graceland. Sweat beaded on his brow as he moved through a complex kata, his body flowing with a grace that surprised even himself. Each movement was deliberate, each breath controlled. For those moments, the hollow feeling vanished. There was only the present, only the discipline, only the quiet power building within him. He finished the kata, striking a final powerful pose. His breath came even, his mind clear. He looked at his reflection in the mirrored wall. He saw the famous face, the familiar smirk. But beneath it, he saw something else too. A longing for peace, for purpose beyond the roar of the crowd. "What am I doing?" he whispered, his voice hoarse from singing. "Is this all there is?" He thought of Sensei Tanaka's quiet strength, the way his movements flowed with effortless power, the way his eyes held a serene calm, even when instructing the most boisterous students. He thought of the dojo, a place of order and respect, a sanctuary from the relentless spotlight. The idea, when it first flickered in his mind, felt like sacrilege, quitting music, leaving behind the throne. It was unthinkable. His whole life had been consumed by it. But the more he considered it, the more it resonated a deep, true chord, striking within him. He remembered a conversation with his good friend Red West, who was also into martial arts. Red had seen the change in him. "You're different when you're doing karate-e," Red had observed one day. "More? You like? You're really focused, really there." That was it, really there. He wasn't really there on stage anymore, not fully. He was performing a role, a beloved character. But the real Elvis felt increasingly distant from the spotlight. The next few days were a blur of internal debate. He went through the motions of his public life, signing autographs, posing for pictures, but his mind was elsewhere. It was in the dojo, in the quiet discipline, in the potential of a different life. He envisioned himself teaching, guiding others, passing on the lessons Sensei Tanaka had imparted to him. He imagined a life where his worth wasn't measured by album sales or box office numbers, but by the progress of his students, by the peace he found within himself. It was a terrifying thought, exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. He knew what he would lose: the adoration, the endless supply of anything money could buy, the sheer power of his fame, but he also knew what he might gain: true purpose, inner peace, and the ability to live a life that felt authentic, that truly belonged to him. One evening, after another performance that left him feeling strangely hollow, he made up his mind. The decision solidified not with a dramatic declaration, but with a quiet certainty that settled deep in his bones. He would step down from the throne. He would exchange his studded jumpsuits for a G. He would trade the screaming crowds for the quiet concentration of a dojo. The king of rock and roll was about to make the most shocking move of his life. He was going to become a full-time karate instructor, and the first person he had to tell was the man who had orchestrated his entire career, Colonel Tom Parker. He knew it wouldn't be easy. He knew there would be hell to pay. But for the first time in a long time, Elvis Presley felt a quiet sense of hope, a stirring of genuine excitement for the path ahead. The meeting with Colonel Tom Parker was set for a Tuesday morning, a day Elvis usually reserved for unwinding or spending time with his inner circle. But today felt different. The air in Colonel Parker's ornate office, usually thick with cigar smoke and the clatter of typewriters, felt charged, almost brittle. Colonel Parker sat behind his desk, a mountain of a man, in his customary suit, his eyes sharp and assessing. He probably expected to discuss a new movie contract or an upcoming tour. He was not prepared for what Elvis was about to say. Colonel Elvis began, his voice surprisingly steady considering the earthquake he was about to unleash. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Parker grunted, a puff of smoke escaping his lips. "Thinking is good, Elvis, but not too much. Keeps a man from working," he chuckled, a sound that grated on Elvis's nerves. Elvis took a deep breath. "No, sir, this is different. I've decided I'm quitting music." The silence that followed was so profound it felt like a physical weight in the room. Colonel Parker's cigar, suspended halfway to his mouth, seemed frozen in time. His eyes, usually shrewd and calculating, widened in disbelief. "You're what?" he finally managed, his voice a low growl, dangerously calm. "I'm retiring," Elvis repeated, looking him straight in the eye. "From recording, from touring, from movies, all of it?" Parker slowly lowered his cigar to an ashtray, the ash crumbling silently. "Elvis, are you feeling all right? Are you sick? Is this some kind of stunt?" His voice was rising now, a hint of the furious bluster to come. "I've never felt better, Colonel Clearer. Anyway, I'm going to open a dojo. I'm going to teach karate full-time." And then the dam broke. Colonel Parker exploded. He slammed his fist on the desk, rattling the expensive china ashtray. "A dojo? You're going to teach karate? Elvis, you're the biggest star in the world. You have millions of fans. We have contracts. Millions of dollars are on the table. You can't just walk away from this? Are you out of your mind?" He paced the room, his face red, his voice booming. "This is madness, pure, unadulterated madness. The public will never understand. They'll think you've lost your marbles. And what about me? What about all our plans?" Elvis let him vent, knowing there was no reasoning with him in this state. He waited for the tirade to subside, for the initial shock and rage to dissipate. "Colonel," he said quietly when Parker finally paused to catch his breath, "my mind is made up. This isn't a whim. This is what I need to do for myself." "For yourself?" Parker scoffed. "You think a life teaching kids how to kick and punch is better than this, than being the king?" He gestured wildly around the room, as if the very walls embodied the magnitude of Elvis's fame. "Yes," Elvis said simply, "I do." The fight lasted for hours. Parker threatened lawsuits, public ridicule, the ruin of Elvis's legacy. He appealed to his loyalty, to his responsibility, to his fans. But Elvis held firm. He explained as calmly as he could the emptiness he felt, the growing pull towards a different, more disciplined path. He talked about finding purpose beyond fame, about wanting to make a real, tangible difference. Eventually, Parker, seeing the unshakable resolve in Elvis's eyes, slumped back into his chair. Defeated, he knew Elvis. When his mind was set, it was set. "You regret this, Elvis," he muttered, his voice devoid of its usual bluster, tinged with a bitterness that cut deep. "You'll come crawling back, they always do." Elvis knew it would be difficult. Breaking the news to his family and friends was a different kind of challenge. His wife Priscilla was initially shocked, then concerned. She understood his need for something more, for spiritual growth, but leaving music entirely seemed extreme. She worried about their future, about the sudden void his departure would create. His father Vernon was confused, unsure how to process such a drastic change. His Memphis Mafia, his loyal group of friends and bodyguards were stunned. Red West, a fellow martial artist, was the only one who seemed to truly understand, offering a quiet nod of respect. The public announcement was a bombshell. It came in the form of a terse press release from Colonel Parker's office, stating that due to personal reasons and a desire to pursue other spiritual and physical disciplines, Elvis Presley would be retiring from music immediately. There would be no farewell tour, no final album. The world reacted with a mixture of disbelief, outrage, and morbid fascination. Tabloids ran screaming headlines: "King abdicates throne," "Elvis gone mad," "From rock and roll to roundhouse kicks," fans protested, sending thousands of letters begging him to reconsider. Radio stations played his hits, his Hayes Head Spreedio. Critics scoffed, music industry insiders shook their heads. A passing phase, they predicted. He'll be back in 6 months, begging for a comeback. But Elvis ignored it all. He turned off the radio, stopped reading the paper. He pored over martial arts texts, trained relentlessly, and planned the layout of his new dojo. He decided to convert a large unused wing of Graceland into his primary training space, ensuring it was accessible but still private. He also scouted locations in town for a public dojo somewhere he could truly connect with the community. The initial days were hard. Transition from constant adoration to sudden, profound quiet was jarring. The phone rang incessantly, with calls from concerned friends, angry executives, and persistent journalists. But Elvis maintained his discipline. He mediated, he trained, he practiced his catus until his muscles ached. In the physical exertion, he found a different kind of peace. A quiet joy that the loudest crowds had never truly provided. He knew he was embarking on an uncertain path, leaving behind a life of unimaginable luxury and fame. But as he stood in the empty space that would soon be his dojo, feeling the cool concrete beneath his bare feet, a sense of rightness settled over him. This was not an end. It was the beginning. The firestorm of public opinion raged outside, but within him a calm resolve had taken root. He was no longer the king of rock and roll. He was simply Elvis, on the verge of becoming sensei. And for the first time in years, he felt truly, completely free. The first order of business was transforming the large, unused wing of Graceland into a proper dude. It wasn't just about clearing out furniture, it was about creating a sanctuary, a place of discipline and focus. Elvis oversaw every detail. Himself, eschewing decorators and designers, he wanted the space to reflect his new path, a blend of traditional Japanese aesthetic and practical functional design. He started by having the thick carpets removed, revealing a smooth, cool concrete floor. He then had a special sprung wooden floor installed, ideal for training cushion yet firm. The walls were painted a calming neutral gray, adorned only with a few carefully chosen pieces. A framed calligraphy scroll bearing the kanji for respect, a simple, elegant disguise, Tanaka, striking a powerful pose. Large mirrors were installed along one wall, essential for students to observe their forms. Tatami mats, thick and traditional, were laid out in the main training area. He personally researched and selected the best quality imported from Japan, wanting everything to be authentic. A small elevated platform at the front served as the sensei's place, where he would demonstrate techniques and address his students. Adjacent to the main training room, he set up a changing area, clean and simple, with lockers and benches. There was also a small, quiet room for meditation, with soft lighting, and a few floor cushions where students could find stillness before or after their training. Word quickly spread through Memphis that Elvis Presley was indeed serious about his new venture. Many were still skeptical, expecting it to be a passing fancy, a celebrity's latest eccentricity. Those who visited the nascent dojo or saw Elvis himself realized this was different. He wasn't just dabbling, he was immersed. He still had his beloved Graceland, his home, but this wing felt distinct, separate from the public persona. It was his personal sanctuary where he could train, reflect, and eventually teach. But Elvis knew that to truly commit to this path, he couldn't just teach from his home. He needed to be part of the community, to open a public dojo where anyone, regardless of their background or fame, could come to learn. He spent weeks scouting locations, eventually finding a spacious old storefront building in a quiet but accessible part of Memphis. It wasn't glamorous, but it had good bones and plenty of natural light. This public dojo, he decided, would be called the Graceland Karate Academy. It was a nod to his past, a way to connect his legacy with his new purpose, but also a clear statement. This was a serious martial arts institution. Converting the storefront was a bigger project. He hired a small, trusted crew, people who had worked for him over the years and understood his need for discretion. They worked tirelessly, clearing out the previous tenants' clutter, installing the same high-quality flooring and tatami mats he had at Graceland. He designed the layout himself, envisioning the flow of students, the placement of punching bags and training dummies. Finances were not an issue for Elvis. Of course, he could have built the grandest dojos in the world, but he deliberately kept it modest. He wanted the focus to be on the training, on the respect for the art, not on lavish surroundings. He wanted his students to understand that true strength wasn't about flashy displays, but about inner discipline. As the dojo took shape, Elvis continued his own rigorous training. He spent hours practicing with Red West and other trusted friends who shared his passion for martial arts. He consulted with Sensei Tanaka, who, despite his initial surprise at Elvis's dramatic career, change had offered his full support and guidance. Tanaka visited the new dojo's, space offering quiet suggestions, approving of the respectful atmosphere Elvis was creating. A dojo is more than a building, Elvis-san, Tanaka had said, tracing the pattern of the tatami mats with his finger. It is a reflection of the heart of the sensei. It must be a place of learning, yes, but also of safety, of growth, and of honor. Elvis took those words to heart. He envisioned a place where troubled kids could find direction, where shy individuals could build confidence, where anyone could discover their inner strength. He knew the initial curiosity would be immense, but he was determined to turn that curiosity into genuine respect for the art and for his teaching. One day, as the final touches were being put on the Graceland Karate Academy, a reporter from a local Memphis paper managed to sneak past the discreet security and snap a few pictures through the large front windows. The photos, showing a focused Elvis in a simple zai, sweeping the floor and arranging equipment, made headlines that were surprisingly positive. The king gets down to business. Elvis prepares his dojos. It portrayed him not as a celebrity dabbling, but as a man truly committed to his new craft. The day finally came for the soft opening, an unofficial start for a few early students. Elvis stood in the center of the clean, quiet dojo, the smell of new wood and fresh tatami filling the air. He wore a crisp white gi, his black belt tied securely around his waist. He looked around the empty space, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment and peace. This wasn't a concert hall filled with screaming fans. This wasn't a movie set with cameras and lights. This was his dojo. This was his new stage, and for the first time in years, the spotlight felt right. It wasn't on him as a performer, but on him as a teacher, a guide, a martial artist. He felt ready. Ready to meet his first students, ready to build his new legacy. King of Rock and Roll was now the sensei of Graceland. Karate Academy and a quiet excitement pulsed through him. He was no longer just building a building. He was building a new life. The first day of official classes at the Graceland Karate Academy was a unique spectacle. Despite Elvis's desire for a quiet opening, the news of his dojos had spread like wildfire. A small crowd had gathered outside, mostly curious onlookers, hoping to catch a glimpse of the former king, but inside the dojo was reserved for those brave enough to step onto the mats. Elvis stood at the front, impeccably dressed in his gi. His black belt, a stark contrast to the white fabric. He felt a different kind of nervousness than before a concert, a quiet anticipation, a deep sense of responsibility. This wasn't about entertaining, it was about teaching. His first group of students slowly filed in a motley crew of various ages and backgrounds. There was a scrawny, shy boy named Mikey, probably no more than 10, clutching his mother's hand. An older woman, Ms. Edna Mae Higgins, with surprisingly bright eyes and a determined set to her jaw, who looked like she'd signed up on a dare. And then there was Jake, a lanky teenager with a perpetual scowl, who looked like he'd been dragged there by his parents. A few others, mostly men in their 20s and 30s, intrigued by the novelty, rounded out the small class. Elvis began, not with flashy moves or a dramatic speech, but with a simple bow. He explained its meaning: respect for the dojo, for the art, for each other, and for oneself. His voice, usually soaring in song, was calm and measured, imbued with a quiet authority that transcended his former fame. "Welcome," he said, his famous charisma still present but now channeled into a different kind of connection. "My name is Elvis. Here you will call me Sensei, and in this dojo we are all equal. We are all students, learning and growing together." He started with the fundamentals, basic stances, proper breathing, and the importance of focus. He moved slowly, demonstrating each movement with precision. His body still remarkably agile, he corrected their forms patiently, gently adjusting an arm here, a foot there. Mikey, the shy boy, was awkward at first, tripping over his own feet. Elvis knelt beside him. "Mikey," he said, his voice soft, "it's all right. Everyone starts somewhere. The most important thing is to try to keep trying." He showed Mikey how to properly shift his weight, and a small tentative smile touched the boy's lips. Ms. Edna Mae, despite her age, was surprisingly nimble. She approached each movement with a focused intensity that impressed Elvis. When she struggled with a particular block, he worked with her, breaking it down into smaller steps. "It's about understanding the movement, Ms. Edna Mae, not just doing it. Feel the power from your center." Jake, the teenager with the scowl, was the biggest challenge. He slouched, he mumbled, and he seemed to resist every instruction. He clearly didn't want to be there. During a break, Elvis approached him. "Jake," he said, "my folks made me, said I needed to learn some discipline." Elvis nodded. "Discipline is good, but it has to come from within. You want to be strong." "Jake, really strong. It's not just about muscles. It's about your mind, about controlling yourself, your emotions." He held out a hand. "Give it a real shot. Just for today, see what happens." Jake eyed his hand suspiciously, then reluctantly shook it. As the weeks turned into months, the Graceland Karate Academy began to find its rhythm. More students enrolled, drawn by word of mouth, and the undeniable pull of learning from Elvis Presley. But they stayed, not because he was Elvis, but because he was a remarkable sensei. Elvis discovered a deep satisfaction in teaching. He saw the transformation in his students. Mikey, once so timid, began to stand taller, his movements becoming more confident. Ms. Edna Mae found a new lease on life. her energy levels soaring, her spirit bright, and Jake, slowly, grudgingly at first, started to engage. He still had his moments, but Elvis noticed the subtle shifts, a focused gaze during a kata, a genuine question asked during a break. Elvis didn't just teach karate techniques. He infused his lessons with life philosophy. He talked about respect, humility, perseverance, and the importance of honesty. He spoke of the spirit of karate, not just fighting, but finding inner peace, overcoming challenges, and becoming a better person. During one class, a student frustrated with a difficult move muttered, "I can't do it, sensei." Elvis stopped the class. "There's no can't in this dojo," he said, his voice firm but kind. "There is only not yet. You break down the problem, you practice, you learn, and eventually you will. It's the same with anything in life." He sometimes shared anecdotes from his own life, not about his fame, but about moments of struggle, of learning, of overcoming. He spoke about the discipline it took to learn a new song, to master a performance drawing parallels to the discipline required in martial arts. He was relatable, real, and profoundly human. His former life felt increasingly distant. He still received fan mail, but it no longer held the same pull. The music world continued without him. Though his songs were still played, his legends still discussed, but Elvis was no longer defined by that. He was defined by the quiet bow at the beginning of class, by the focused faces of his students, by the sense of purpose that filled him each day. One afternoon, after a particularly good class, Elvis watched Mikey tie his belt with a newfound confidence. The boy looked up at him and smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "Thank you, sensei," Mikey said, his voice clear. "I feel stronger." Elvis felt a warmth spread through him, a feeling far more profound than any roar of a crowd. This was his new stage. This was his new song. And it was a melody of transformation, playing out in the lives of his students. He had found his true calling, not in the dazzling lights of stardom, but in the quiet, disciplined heart of the dojo. He had taken his first bow as sensei, and he knew with every fiber of his being that he had made the right choice. The Graceland Karate Academy wasn't just a place to learn kicks and punches. It was becoming a true community. Elvis, or Sensei Elvis as he was universally known, fostered an environment where students felt safe, challenged, and supported. But like any burgeoning enterprise, challenges arose, testing his resolve, and the dojo's foundation. One of the first hurdles was financial. While Elvis himself had ample personal wealth, he was determined that the dojo should operate as a self-sustaining entity. He kept tuition fees affordable, wanting to be accessible to everyone regardless of income. This meant careful budgeting and relying on the consistent growth of student enrollment. There were weeks when he wondered if he'd underestimated the practicalities of running a small business. He learned to manage payroll, order supplies, and handle unexpected repairs, tasks far removed from concert tours. These mundane responsibilities, however, grounded him, making his new life feel even more real. Another challenge came from a rival dojos in town, run by a Sensei Nakamura. Nakamura, a stern traditionalist instructor, viewed Elvis's venture with skepticism, if not outright disdain. He saw Elvis as a celebrity dabbler, bringing a spectacle to a serious martial art. Rumors circulated that Nakamura dismissed the Graceland Karate Academy as showmanship, not true karate. Some of Nakamura's students occasionally visited the Graceland Academy, not to join, but to observe. Sometimes with sneers, sometimes just with wary curiosity. Elvis, ever the peacemaker, simply extended an open invitation for them to train if they wished, refusing to engage in any rivalry. But the most significant crucible came from within his own student body. Jake, the lanky teenager from the first class, had shown remarkable progress. He was still quiet and prone to brooding, but his focus in class was undeniable, and his techniques were improving rapidly. However, his newfound confidence, combined with his lingering anger issues, began to manifest outside the dojo. One evening, Elvis received a call from Jake's distraught parents. Jake had gotten into a fight at school, not a martial arts sparring match, but a street brawl. He'd used some of his karate moves, injuring another student. The school was considering expulsion. Elvis felt a cold knot in his stomach. This was precisely what he feared. The power of karate, when misused, could be destructive. Jake sat sullenly in his living room, refusing to make eye contact. "They were picking on me, Sensei," he mumbled. "Calling me names, I couldn't take it anymore." Elvis sat across from him. "Jake, we teach discipline here. We teach control. We teach you how to defend yourself, yes, but only when absolutely necessary, and never to provoke, never to hurt someone out of anger or pride." His voice was firm, but empathetic. "You used your skill, your power to escalate a situation, not to diffuse it. That is not the way of karate." He explained the concept of Bushido, the samurai code of honor, courage, compassion, and self-control. He reminded Jake that true strength lay in restraint, in using one's power responsibly. "You have a gift, Jake, but with that gift comes a great responsibility. If you cannot control yourself, then you cannot be a true martial artist." Elvis spent hours talking with Jake and his parents, mediating with the school, ensuring Jake understood the gravity of his actions. As a consequence, Jake was suspended and Elvis imposed a temporary ban from the dojo. Not a permanent expulsion, but a period of reflection and remorse. "You come back when you understand what you did wrong, and when you are ready to truly commit to the principles of this dojo," Elvis told him. The incident spread through the student body, causing a ripple of concern. Some parents wondered if Elvis, for all his charisma, truly had the sternness required to manage potentially volatile students. He knew he had to prove he was more than a former singer. He was a serious sensei. During the next few classes, Elvis emphasized the ethical foundations of karate even more strongly. He dedicated entire sessions to discussions on self-control, empathy, and conflict resolution. He had students pair up and practice de-escalation scenarios, showing how a calm demeanor and a strong stance could often prevent a fight entirely. He shared stories of his own struggles with anger and impulsiveness in his youth, making himself vulnerable, showing them that even he had to learn self-mastery. One evening, weeks after his suspension, Jake appeared at the dojo, standing awkwardly by the entrance. Elvis saw him, but continued teaching. When class ended, Jake walked up to him. He was still slouching, but his eyes were different. "Remorseful, a little scared, Sensei," he mumbled, shuffling his feet. I messed up. Bad. I'm really sorry. I want to come back. I promise I'll do better." Elvis looked at the boy, seeing genuine regret. He saw not just a troubled teenager, but a student who had faced his own mistakes. "Jake," he said, a small smile touching his lips, "welcome back. The mat is waiting." From that day forward, Jake was a transformed student. He still had his struggles, but he approached his training with a new dedication, a deeper understanding of the responsibility that came with his growing skill. He became a quiet leader among the younger students, gently reminding them of the dojo's rules and principles. The incident, though difficult, had strengthened the Graceland Karate Academy. It showed that Sensei Elvis was not just a celebrity name. He was a dedicated instructor, capable of handling real-world challenges, of guiding his students not just in martial arts, but in life. He had passed his own test, and in doing so had deepened the trust and respect of his students and the community. The dojo had weathered its first storm, emerging stronger, more resilient, and more truly dedicated to its purpose. Years began to slip by, not in the frantic blur of touring and recording, but in the steady rhythm of seasons. The Graceland Karate Academy thrived. Sensei Elvis had established himself not as a novelty, but as a respected figure in the local community and the wider martial arts world. He occasionally attended regional seminars, always as a humble student, seeking knowledge, quietly observing, learning from other masters. His own reputation as an compassionate instructor grew steadily. One crisp autumn afternoon, as a class of intermediate students practiced their katas, a figure quietly entered the dojos and stood by the entrance, observing. He was a man in his late 30s, dressed in a sharp suit with a familiar intelligent gaze and a neatly trimmed beard. He wasn't a parent, nor a prospective student. He was a face from Elvis's past. It was Larry Geller, his former hairdresser and close friend, a man who had also been deeply interested in spiritual and philosophical matters during Elvis's music career. Larry had always encouraged Elvis's intellectual curiosity and quest for meaning. After Elvis quit music, Larry had gone on to pursue his own path, opening a successful spiritual counseling center in California. Their contact had become less frequent, but the bond remained. Elvis, in the middle of correcting a student's dance, felt a familiar presence. He looked up, and his eyes met Larry's. A wide, genuine smile spread across his face. "Larry," he exclaimed, excusing himself from the class for a moment. They embraced warmly, a hug filled with years of unspoken history. "Elvis," Larry said, his voice thick with emotion, stepping back to take in his friend. "Look at you. You look different." Elvis chuckled. "Different. Good, I hope." "Different real," Larry corrected, his eyes scanning the dojo, taking in the focused students, the quiet atmosphere. "I saw the articles, heard the rumors. People always wondered if you'd crack, if you'd regret it, if you'd come crawling back to the stage." "And what do you think?" Elvis asked, a playful glint in his eye. Larry smiled, a knowing, approving smile. "I think you found your truth. I think you found what you were looking for." They talked for hours that evening, long after the last student had left the dojo. They sat on the clean tatami mats, sipping herbal tea, catching up on each other's lives. Larry recounted his own journey, the challenges and triumphs of building his counseling practice. Elvis, in turn, spoke of the immense satisfaction he found in teaching, the unexpected joys and the quiet struggles of running the dojo. "The funny thing is," Elvis mused, "I thought I'd miss the applause, the roar, but there's a different kind of reward here. When a shy kid finds his voice or a troubled teenager learns self-control, that's a louder applause to me now. It resonates deeper." Larry nodded. "You always had a gift for connecting with people, Elvis. On stage it was through your music. Now it's through your guidance, your presence. You're still inspiring, but in a much more profound way." Larry revealed the true reason for his visit. He was doing a series of interviews for a spiritual wellness magazine, and he wanted to feature Elvis's story not as a celebrity scandal, but as a genuine journey of self-discovery and purpose. They need to know that happiness isn't always where you expect to find it. That true fulfillment isn't about external validation, but internal peace. Elvis was hesitant at first. He had deliberately retreated from the public eye, but Larry argued persuasively, emphasizing that it wouldn't be about his past fame, but about his present purpose. It would be about the transformation, the lessons learned, the new life he had built. After much thought, Elvis agreed. He trusted Larry. He trusted that the story would be told with integrity. The article, when it was published, was titled "The King's New Kingdom: How Elvis Presley Found His True Crown in the Dojo." It was a beautifully written piece, focusing on Elvis's spiritual journey, his dedication to martial arts, and the profound impact he was having on his students and community. It included candid interviews with Ms. Edna May, who praised his patience, and even a cautiously optimistic quote from Jake, who spoke of Elvis teaching him about respect and how to control himself. The article didn't bring a new wave of celebrity seekers to the dojo. Instead, it brought a different kind of attention. It brought martial arts enthusiasts from other states, curious to train under the sensei, who was once the king. It brought individuals seeking genuine growth, drawn by the story of a man who had sacrificed everything for a deeper purpose. The publicity also softened the stance of some of the more traditional martial arts instructors, including Sensei Perhaps I misjudged him. He seems to have found a true path. The rivalry, which had largely been one-sided on Nakamura's part, began to dissipate, replaced by a quiet, grudging respect. Elvis himself remained unchanged by the renewed, albeit different, attention. He continued to dedicate himself to his students, to his training, into the quiet, fulfilling life he had built. He was still Elvis, yes, but he was also sensei, a guide, a mentor. He had found his true stage not under the bright lights, but on the quiet, hallowed ground of the dojo. And the applause he now sought wasn't for himself, but for the growth he witnessed in others, a silent symphony of transformation that resonated deep within his soul. He was truly home. The air in the Graceland Karate Academy hummed with a new kind of energy. The annual Tennessee State's Karate Championship was just a few months away, and Sensei Elvis had decided to enter a small team of his most dedicated students. This wasn't about winning at all costs. It was about the experience, the growth, and the opportunity for his students to test their skills and courage in a formal setting. His team consisted of a diverse group. Mikey, now a confident 13-year-old with surprising speed. MS Ednume, pushing 70 but agile and determined, who would compete, and a kata, a focused young man of 17, who would compete in both kata and kumite sparring. There were also a few other promising students equally committed. Elvis believed in meticulous preparation. He designed a rigorous training regimen, pushing his students harder than ever before, but always with encouragement and a keen eye for their individual needs. For Mikey, the challenge was mental. He had the speed, but sometimes lacked the power or the conviction in his movements. Mikey, Elvis would say, demonstrating a powerful punch. Imagine your opponent. Feel the impact, not with anger, but with focus. Let your spirit drive the technique. He spent extra time with Mikey building his confidence, having him visualize success. MS Ednume's challenge was flexibility and stamina. She practiced her kata with remarkable grace, but maintaining precision through the entire routine was taxing. Elvis taught her specific breathing exercises and stretches, always reminding her, "It's not about perfection, MS Ednume. It's about the journey, about showing your best effort, your spirit." She would often be the last one to leave, meticulously rehearsing each movement. Jake, despite his progress, still struggled with controlling his power in kumite. He was strong, but sometimes his competitive spirit overshadowed his technique, making him prone to over-aggression. Elvis put him through controlled sparring drills, emphasizing precision and control over brute force. "Jake, you have great power, but true mastery is knowing when to hold back, when to unleash it, and when to defend. Use your mind first, then your body." He constantly reminded Jake about the spirit of fair play and the importance of respect for his opponent. Even in competition, training sessions were long and intense. They focused on conditioning drills and endless repetition of katas. Elvis introduced advanced sparring techniques, teaching them defensive strategies and how to read an opponent. He brought in other black belts from his acquaintance, including his own Sensei Tanaka, for special guest training sessions, exposing his students to different styles and perspectives. Tanaka observed with a quiet pride, seeing how Elvis had truly embraced the role of sensei. Beyond the physical training, Elvis emphasized mental preparation. He led meditation sessions, teaching his students how to visualize their performance, how to calm their nerves, and how to focus their minds. He spoke about the importance of losing gracefully and winning humbly. "The outcome of the tournament is important, yes," he told them after one particularly exhausting session. "But the real victory is in what you learn about yourselves, and the effort you put in, that's what truly matters." There were moments of frustration, of course. A student would miss a move or feel discouraged. Elvis would be there, a comforting hand on a shoulder, a quiet word of encouragement. a demonstration that perfectly broke down a complex technique. He was sensei, mentor, and almost like a second father figure to many of them. One evening, after everyone else had left, Elvis found Jake still practicing, muttering to himself in frustration. As he repeatedly tried a difficult spinning kick, "Something bothering you, Jake?" Elvis asked, leaning against the dojo's wall. "It's just, what if I mess up, Sensei? What if I disappoint you?" Elvis walked over and stood beside him. "Jake, you will never disappoint me by trying your best. The only way you disappoint me is if you give up, or if you don't learn from your mistakes." He paused. "Remember what we talked about regarding control. It applies here too. Control your fears, control your doubts. They are just as much an opponent as the person across the mat." He then demonstrated the kick slowly, explaining each subtle shift of weight, each twist of the hips. He had Jake try it again, offering quiet, precise corrections. After a few tries, Jake's kick was cleaner, more powerful. A small spark of triumph lit in his eyes. As the tournament drew nearer, the tension in the dojo grew, but it was a healthy tension, an excited anticipation. Elvis held a final pre-tournament meeting, reminding his students of the do's core values: respect, humility, and perseverance. "When you step onto that mat," he said, looking at each of them in turn, "you are not just representing yourselves. You are representing the dojos. You are representing the spirit of karate. Give it your all, fight with honor, and most importantly, enjoy the journey." The day before the championship, the dojo was filled with a quiet reverence. The students performed their final practice. Katas, their movements precise and confident. Elvis watched them, a deep sense of satisfaction warming him. He saw not just skilled martial artists, but young men and women who had grown in character, in spirit. He thought of the crowds, the screaming fans, the flashy lights. And then he looked at the quiet dedication in the eyes of his students. He knew without a shadow of a doubt that this was where he belonged. This was his purpose. The Tennessee State Karate Championship was not just a competition. It was a testament to the new life he had built, brick by disciplined brick, and the profound, lasting impact. The atmosphere at the Tennessee State Karate Championship was electric. The large gymnasium, usually home to basketball games, was transformed into a sea of white giz, banners, and the quiet murmur of anticipation. Families and friends filled the bleachers, their nervous energy palpable. Sensei Elvis sat with his students calm and composed, offering final words of encouragement. Mikey, despite his newfound confidence, was visibly trembling. "What if I forget my kata, Sensei?" he whispered, his eyes wide. Elvis put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You won't, Mikey. You've practiced 1,000 times. Just breathe. Focus on the first move and the rest will follow. Trust your training." Ms. Edname, surprisingly, seemed the most serene. "Win or lose, Sensei, she says already been an incredible journey. I'm just grateful for the chance." Jake, typically stoic, looked more serious than nervous. His gaze was fixed on the sparring ring. He was ready. The competition began. Mikey was up first for his kata division. He walked onto the mat, bowed, and took a deep breath. For a moment his eyes flickered to the judges, then to Elvis, who offered a subtle, encouraging nod, and then Mikey began. His movements, though not perfectly flawless, were filled with a newfound power and conviction. He channeled his nervousness into his performance, his young body moving with surprising speed and focus. When he finished, he bowed deeply, his chest heaving, a triumphant flush on his cheeks. He might not win, but he had performed with heart. Ms. Edna Mae followed later in her kata division. Her routine was a testament to grace and inner strength. Her movements were precise, imbued with years of life experience, her spirit shining through. The crowd murmured appreciatively at her elegant performance. When she finished, she too bowed, a serene smile on her face. Then came the kunite sparring divisions. Jake was in a tough bracket. His first opponent was larger and more aggressive, trying to overwhelm him with brute force. Elvis watched intensely from the sidelines, calling out subtle instructions. "Control the distance, Jake. Keep your guard up, folk." Jake, remembering Elvis's lessons on restraint and precision, moved fluidly, using blocks and evasions, looking for openings rather than just charging in. He landed a clean, scoring strike and won the first round. The match was a blur of swift movements, strikes, and blocks. Midway through the match, Jake landed a powerful reverse punch. His opponent stumbled, momentarily winded. A flicker of his old aggression, the desire to finish it quickly, crossed Jake's face. But then, Elvis's words echoed in his mind. "Use your mind first, then your body." Jake pulled back slightly, maintaining his stance, waiting for a clean, controlled opening rather than rushing in recklessly. He won the match, not just with skill, but with disciplined control. The Graceland Karate Academy was doing well. Mikey placed third in his division, beaming with pride as he received his medal. MS. Edme, to everyone's delight, especially her own, won a silver medal, her quiet determination finally rewarded. Then came Jake's final match against a formidable opponent from Sensei Nakamura's dojo, a student known for his aggressive style and intimidating presence. The tension was palpable. The match started fast, both fighters exchanging powerful blows. Jake, remembering his past mistake, maintained his composure, moving strategically, defending effectively, and striking with controlled power. Mid-match, Jake landed a clean, decisive kick. His opponent stumbled back, seemingly caught off guard. As he regained his balance, his foot slipped and he fell awkwardly. Before anyone could react, Jake, instead of pressing his advantage, as many would, immediately stopped, took a step back, and offered his hand to help his opponent up. A hush fell over the crowd. It was a simple gesture, but one steeped in the highest principle of martial arts: respect and honor. Even in the heat of competition, the judges conferred, visibly impressed. While the fall wasn't a penalty, Jake's sportsmanship was a powerful statement. The match continued, but the dynamic had shifted. Jake fought cleanly, honorably, never losing his composure. He won the match by a narrow margin, not just on points, but on spirit. As Jake bowed to his opponent, who surprisingly offered a genuine nod of respect, a quiet murmur rippled through the stands. Sensei Nakamura, in the audience, watched with an unreadable expression. Back with his team, Elvis clapped Jake on the back, a proud smile on his face. "That's it, Jake," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "That's the spirit of karate. You won, not just with your skill, but with your heart." Jake for once didn't scowl. He just nodded, a humble satisfaction in his eyes. The tournament was a triumph for the Graceland Karate Academy. Not just in medals, Jake took gold in kunite and bronze in kata, but in validate Elvis's approach to teaching. It wasn't about the show. It was about the substance. It was about developing not just fighters, but well-rounded individuals. As the day ended, Elvis stood amidst his beaming, exhausted students, the clink of medals a sweet counterpoint to the quiet sense of achievement. He saw Mikey's unbridled joy, MS Ednamak's serene contentment, and Jake's quiet pride. He had faced his own challenges, and his students had faced theirs. And on the mat of truth, they had all emerged victorious, not just against opponents, but against their own limitation. He knew then more than ever that this was his purpose, his legacy, far more enduring than any fleeting moment of fame. Years folded into decades. The Graceland Karate Academy flourished, growing from a modest venture into a highly respected institution in the martial arts community. Sensei Elvis, now in his 50s, then 60s, was no longer just the former king of rock and roll who taught karate. He was sensei, a revered master known for his unique blend of discipline, compassion, and profound life wisdom. The dojo itself had expanded. What started as a converted storefront now occupied a larger, purpose-built facility, still modest in appearance but impeccably maintained. The original Graceland wing remained his private training space, a quiet sanctuary where he continued his own lifelong practice, constantly refining his art. His first students had grown up. Mikey, the once shy boy, was now a confident young man in his late 20s. He had achieved his black belt under Sensei Elvis, graduated from college with honors, and was now a successful architect. He still trained at the dojo several times a week and occasionally assisted Elvis with the younger classes, embodying the spirit of discipline and quiet strength Elvis had instilled in him. Anime, now well into her 80s, was a beloved figure at the dojo. She no longer actively trained in combat, but she came to every class, observing from the sidelines, offering gentle encouragement to the younger students, and occasionally demonstrating a perfect graceful kata. With an astonishing fluidity for her age, she was a living testament to the lifelong benefits of martial arts and Sensei Elvis's teachings, and Jake had become a pillar of the dojo. After high school, he had served in the military, carrying the discipline and self-control he learned from Elvis into his service. Upon returning, he became Elvis's head assistant instructor, a trusted second in command. He was stern but fair, a mirror of Sensei Elvis's own teaching style, having fully overcome his youthful anger. He now guided new generations of students, instilling in them the same principles that had transformed his own life. He had found his purpose in teaching and mating, continuing Sensei Elvis's legacy. Parents from all walks of life trusted their children to Sensei Elvis. They knew he taught more than just physical defense. He taught character, he taught integrity, he taught resilience. The dojo had become a haven for many, a place where children from difficult backgrounds found structure and self-worth, where troubled teens found guidance, and where adults found purpose and physical well-being. Elvis rarely spoke of his past life as a music icon, unless a curious student asked, and when he did, it wasn't with longing or regret, but with a quiet understanding that it had been a necessary part of his journey, leading him to where he was meant to be. He would sometimes explain the discipline it took to learn a song to perform for thousands, drawing parallels to the discipline required to master a kata. He used his unique life experiences as parables, teaching lessons of focus, perseverance, and the importance of finding your true passion. His days were filled with teaching, training, and quiet moments of reflection. He still lived at Graceland, but it felt less like a monument to a past life and more like a peaceful home, its halls now filled with the echoes of children's laughter from the dojo's wing rather than the clamor of public life. His relationship with Sensei Tanaka remained strong. Tanaka, now retired, often visited, sitting quietly in the back of the class, a small approving smile on his face as he watched his former student, now a revered sensei himself, guide his own students. "You have built something remarkable," Elvis-sen, Tanaka once told him, after a particularly moving black belt ceremony where Jake had formally received his Nidden, second-degree black belt. "A legacy, not of fleeting fame, but of enduring impact. You have shown them the true spirit of Budo." Elvis felt a profound sense of contentment. He wasn't on magazine covers, he wasn't selling out stadiums, but he was waking up each day with a clear purpose, contributing to the lives of others, making a real difference. He was healthier, both physically and mentally, than he had ever been during his music career. The chronic exhaustion was gone, replaced by a deep, sustaining energy. One morning, as he walked through the quiet dojo before class, he paused by the wall where his black belts hung. He touched the worn fabric, each one representing years of dedication, not just his own, but the journey he had shared with countless students. He thought of the young Elvis, restless and searching despite all the outward success. He thought of the bold, terrifying decision he had made. And then he thought of Mikey, Jake, MS, Anime, and all the others whose lives he had touched. He thought of the quiet satisfaction of seeing a student master a difficult technique, the pride in their eyes when they earned a new belt, the gratitude from parents whose children had found direction and respect. This was his kingdom, not a kingdom built on gold records and movie contracts, but on discipline, character, and the quiet, doting power of teaching. His crown was not adorned with jewels, but with the respect and love of his students. He had found his true calling, and in doing so had created a legacy far richer and more meaningful than he could ever have imagined. The celebration was simple as Sensei Elvis preferred, but deeply meaningful. It was the 30th anniversary of the Graceland Karate Academy. The dojo was packed with current and former students, their families and friends. The air vibrated, not with the anticipation of a concert, but with warmth, respect, and a profound sense of community. Sensei Elvis, now a wise and silver-haired man in his late 60s, stood at the front of the dojo, his presence commanding yet gentle. His original sensei, Tanaka, now in his 90s, sat beaming in the front row, a revered guest of honor. Mikey, now a distinguished architect, and Jake, a respected Nidan and co-instructor, stood proudly beside Elvis. The evening was filled with demonstration. Younger students performed their basic katas with surprising precision. Older students truncated advanced techniques, their movements fluid and powerful. Mikey and Jake performed a synchronized kata, a testament to their mastery and the enduring bond forged in this very dojo. Throughout it all, the recurring theme was the impact Sensei Elvis had on their lives. Student after student stood up to share stories. A shy young woman spoke of finding her voice and confidence through karate. A former delinquent recounted how Sensei Elvis's stern guidance had turned his life around. A parent tearfully thanked him for giving her child direction and purpose. When it was Sensei Elvis's turn to speak, a hush fell over the room. His voice, still rich and resonant, filled the space not with song but with wisdom. 30 years ago, he began, a twinkle in his eye. I made a decision that many thought was foolish. I walked away from a life of incredible fame and fortune, and truth be told, even I wasn't entirely sure what I was walking towards. He paused, looking out at the faces, seeing generations of students, their eyes reflecting gratitude and love. But I knew I was searching for something real, something that truly mattered. He gestured around the dojo. I found it here, in the quiet discipline of the kata, in the shared struggle of kumaite, in the respectful bow, and most importantly, in each and every one of you. He spoke of the lessons he had learned from them, the joy of witnessing their growth, the profound satisfaction of helping them unlock their inner strength. This dojo isn't just about learning to punch or kick, he said. It's about learning to stand tall, to be humble, to be resilient, to respect yourself and others, to find peace within. He then performed a kata, the master's demonstration, his movements graceful and powerful, a living testament to decades of unwavering dedication. Despite his age, his strikes were crisp, his blocks firm, his balance impeccable. Every movement told a story of discipline, mastery, and a profound connection to the art. The room was silent, captivated by the sheer artistry and spirit. After his demonstration, the entire dojo rose to its feet, not for applause, but for a deep, reverent bow, a collective sign of profound respect. The silence that followed was more powerful than any stadium roar, a testament to the true impact of his life. Later, as the celebration continued with quiet conversations and shared meals, Sensei Tanaka approached Elvis. "Elvis-san," he said, his voice soft, his eyes shining with pride. "You have achieved mastery not just in karate, but in life. You have found true Bushido." Elvis smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile. "Only because I had a great sensei to show me the way, Tanaka-san." He looked around the room with the laughter, the camaraderie, the shared purpose that filled his dojo. He saw Mikey exchanging ideas with Jake, 2 generations of his students now becoming teachers themselves. He saw Ms. Edna May, her eyes sparkling, sharing a story with a young family. He remembered the screaming fans, the flashing cameras, the endless demands of his former life, and he felt no regret, only a deep, abiding gratitude. The unseen applause of transformed lives, the quiet satisfaction of purpose fulfilled, resonated within him, a melody far more beautiful and enduring than any song he had ever sung. He hadn't quit music because he stopped loving it. He had quit because he discovered a deeper love. He had exchanged a crown of ephemeral fame for a crown of enduring purpose. He was no longer the king of rock and roll, and he didn't need to be. He was Sensei Elvis, a master of martial arts, a guide of souls, and a man who had truly found his way home. His legacy was not etched in pylon, but in the hearts and minds of every student who had stepped onto his mats, and in the quiet, powerful peace he finally felt within himself, and that he knew was the greatest triumph of all.